Despite a dominant performance in periods, Spurs were once again outdone at Wembley by a Chelsea sucker punch. We discuss Sunday's defeat, look ahead to the Champions League draw, and preview Burnley to come on this week's bumper E-Spurs Podcast.
Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Come on, you Spurs! Tottenham, Tottenham!
Hello guys, welcome back for yet another hour of talking all things Tottenham Hotspur. Please don't forget you can subscribe to the show via iTunes or Raycast and get every brand new episode direct as it's released. You can of course follow us across all the usual social media platforms. We are on Twitter and Instagram at E_Spurs. We are on Facebook, facebook.com/E-Spurs page. We are also on YouTube, Pinterest and Tumblr, and for all of the links to all E-Spurs platforms you can head to our brand new website of www.e-spurs.com. On the E-Spurs podcast tonight we'll be discussing the defeat to Chelsea at Wembley. We'll be taking your questions for tonight's panel, we'll be previewing the Champions League draw, and finally then looking forward to Sunday against Burnley back at Wembley. But before we talk all things Tottenham Hotspur tonight, I'm pleased to say the three guests joining us are back on the show: Jason McGovern, the son of John White, Mr. Rob White himself, and finally, last but not least, delighted to have him back on the show, Vass Koni. Jace, I'm going to come round to you first. I feel like it's a bit of deja vu, Jace. I feel like I'm repeating the same thing we said when we did the post-pod against Chelsea in the semi-final. But again, a decent performance. Felt we deserved more. How did you see it, Jace?
Well, I think we'd all probably say we felt that we deserved more. But, you know, I hate to start on a negative, but we can't get around the fact that, you know, it's the second time inside 4 months that we've had 10 corners more than they had. I think in the semi-final the corners was 12v1. Yesterday it was 13v3, 63, 64, 65% possession, exactly the same. More shots on target. Chelsea have only had 7 shots on target in those 2 games and scored with 6 of them. So, you know, it just shows you how ruthless they are. And you do feel that we have a mental block when we play them where players for... I don't know, it's got to be a mental thing where when you play them, players make mistakes that they don't seem to make against anyone else, and they just ruthlessly punish it every time.
I remember you, Jace, previously you mentioned the word gamecraft, and I feel like, again, I was watching that game yesterday, I just had your thoughts in my head when I was thinking about it, because again, Spurs typically, in a game where we work so hard to get ourselves back into it, we gave it away, Jace. Yeah,
and I think... You know, I don't want to be too critical of Pochettino's football because I love watching the football that we play and I love the fact that we're trying to win a game late on. But, you know, the pragmatic way of say, Mourinho is Hugo just hold the ball until the team gets back into its shape because we know how dangerous Chelsea are on the counter. And we try and win it, but there are times you think, no, just, you know, calm yourself down, keep that composure. And we throw the ball into a dangerous area on the field. Now, don't get me wrong, Wanyama should control it anyway, but you're putting that risk. You're putting that risk in place, particularly when you play Chelsea. And unfortunately, it's the game where you can't take risks against them. And when we beat them 2-0 at White Hart Lane, we didn't take a risk, and we got everything spot on. And yesterday was the old thing that when we play them, we just show that mental weakness, and they pounce on it every time.
Coming over to you, Rob. I think Jason, like I say, has stolen my thunder in terms of the stats there. 68 possession for Spurs, 18 shots to Chelsea's 9, 6 on target compared to 2, 14 corners compared to 3. Rob, is it a Wembley factor?
I think we were very unlucky to be playing Chelsea when we did. I don't think Wembley helped, but I think if it had been, I don't know, maybe Burnley, we'll find out on Sunday, I guess. But I think actually in perspective, it has to. I read today, you know, it's our first, I know it's not a home game, but it is a home game. It's our first home defeat for 15 months. And Vass, you know, there's enough of us of a certain age that have never actually been able to sit there and say that. I agree with Jason, more or less everything you said, actually. And I think, unfortunately, it's still not quite the Spurs way to do exactly what you say. in hindsight, a draw against Chelsea at Wembley, our first league game at Wembley, would have been a great result. But I think we just got carried away. The Vertonghen interview, there was the Vertonghen interview that's been on social media today saying that, they all were really confident at half time. And I think all the Spurs crowd that I was with, everybody was reasonably confident that we were going to pull it back. And I think game management is probably the key. And we could have just settled 1-1.
Coming over to you, Vass. I mean, like I say, Rob says there about settling for the 1-1. What would you have rather seen Pochettino do? We know he's a manager that likes to, roll the dice, gamble. I think, like I say, it has been the Spurs way that, if you do take a gamble, there's the opportunity to win the game. Do you agree possibly with Jace and, like I say, Rob there, that maybe we should have taken the 1-1, get a point?
I can't fault Pochettino in going for the win. But given what happened in the semi-final game against Chelsea, it sort of mirrored that performance where when we levelled it, it only looked like there was one team in it that was going to go on and win, and that would be Tottenham. But we were sucker punched then, and we were sucker punched again yesterday. So on the one hand, I can understand why he'd go for it. We were in the ascendancy. We had all this possession. We had some, number of chances more than them. But Jace is quite right. I mean, they've had, 7 shots on target in those 2 games, and they've scored with 6 of them. And you just can't legislate with that. When all is said and done, though, I mean, it wasn't sort of Pochettino's going for it that cost us. It was, sadly, individual errors. The ball out from Hugo was a bit rushed, wasn't great. Wanyama, by that point, was looking tired from before anyway. It was poor control, lost the ball, and we were just not recovering quick enough. And even then, Hugo really should have saved that shot by Alonso. So there were factors that contributed to our defeat, but I don't necessarily believe it was because of Pochettino going for it.
I mean, I agree with you on that. I mean, it's such a difficult one to kind of call. But when I bring it back around to you, Jace, you mentioned there about it being a Chelsea stumbling block. With regards to Wembley, really quickly, we are going to talk about the players shortly, but I just want to put it out there. I mean, this Wembley factor, we're going to have to find a way, Jace, of trying to manage it. I think, like I say yesterday, the performance, that can't be questioned. But the facts are there, Jace. I think it's 7 out of our last 10 defeats now at Wembley. This group in particular, Jace, it's 5 out of the last 6 games we've lost there and 1 win in 11. Do you think, Jace, it's a case where it's possibly the players don't look too comfortable or relaxed on the turf, and that's why we're seeing the individual errors that are being made out there?
No, I don't think it. I'll take Wembley out, and as we just said off air, I think the problem is that you look at 4 of those 7 defeats have been by Chelsea, and you look at our overall record with Chelsea, and we've won 7 of the last 66 against Chelsea. And to me, it's not a Wembley hoodoo, it's a Chelsea hoodoo. And we've just seen us play decent football against Chelsea in 2 games running, and yet they've beaten us both times. And I don't think that's to do with Wembley. It is a mental block that we have against them. And you take the Chelsea games out of it, and all right, the record's still not great, but it wouldn't be anywhere near as in focus as it is, because 4 or 5 of those defeats just wouldn't be there. I know our 1 win, it was in a final against Chelsea, but I think if we'd have played, we'll have a better idea next week when it's Burnley. But I'm sure if we'd have had Everton, Sunderland, I don't know, West Ham and somebody else there, our record wouldn't be as bad. It's the fact that we've had 4 straight defeats to Chelsea there.
I come over to you, Rob. I mean, you mentioned there it was the first home defeat within 15 months. I'm going to ask the same question to you. Do you think it's a case where the players, although we're seeing, progress in terms of the performances, we're still seeing this situation where the players, they don't look, I don't think they don't look comfortable there at certain times in the game. Do you go alongside that, or do you think now we just need to move on from that and find a way to win?
I think everything's being said by everyone behind the scenes. Pochettino downwards are saying, well, what problem? There isn't a problem. But quite clearly, as the statistics are just showing, there is a problem. I wonder whether on the match today highlights last night they were pointing out the example of the wing backs Trippier and Davis not pushing forward. And although the pitch isn't that much bigger, it's still something. Isn't it 400 square meters bigger, or is that my math's not very good? But so it's almost like a perspective thing that you think this whole thing is much wider. I don't know. I just think I think it's something obviously we're going to have to overcome. And I, like many others, are saying, well, there's only 18 more league games left at that place. Because I think as a fan base, nobody's embraced it.
No, I mean, it is difficult to embrace it. I mean, because, like I say, the lack of wins we've had there. Coming over to you, Vass, you've mentioned already about the individual errors. I mean, we're going to have to go through them, as much as painful that's going to be. Victor Wanyama, first off, Vass, he's been absolutely phenomenal for Tottenham since signing. I mean, I count yesterday really as his first bad game in a Spurs shirt. And when you consider what he's played over 40, 50 games for Spurs, can we allow him that one-off day?
Yeah, of course we can. I think it brings into question whether he was rushed back. He hasn't had much of a pre-season, and he's clearly been brought in because it was Chelsea. Had it been a different opponent, perhaps Pochettino would have been happy to leave him out a little bit longer. But the midfield was a problem for us yesterday. I think Dyer didn't have a great game either, although his presence was missed when he went off. And it's been we didn't really get to grips with it in that area, I thought, despite the fact that we had a lot of possession. There was some sloppy play going on. So Wanyama should have done a lot better with that clearance by Hugo. And I mentioned previously that Hugo should have done better himself. So individual errors led to this. But the question does remain, was Wanyama sort of rushed back, and even Trippier to that degree. Rob's mentioned the analysis on Match of the Day that focused on the lack of forward play by our wing backs, and that was quite evident. So yeah, there was a few different things. I certainly would shy away from calling it a Wembley hoodoo. I think we're playing a lot better, and really agree with Jason in that it seems to be a Chelsea hoodoo.
And coming back round to you, Jace, Victor Wanyama, just touching it with yourself, such an out-of-character performance, wasn't it? You can only imagine, just reflecting on his previous games for Tottenham through his career so far at Spurs, I don't think he was fit. What do you think, Jace?
Well, we all know he hasn't had any real pre-seasons to talk about. He missed several of those pre-season friendlies, and he was only on the bench last week. The one thing I will say is Pochettino's got a little bit of flack for taking Dyer off over Wanyama. But I think we all probably thought that Son's got to come on because we need a goal, and the choice was either Dyer or Wanyama. And to me, I thought he made the choice purely because Eric Dyer was on a yellow card and was once or twice was on the full stretch, and you thought, you could have seen another 15, 20 minutes, one more foul from Eric Dyer, and you go down to 10 men. So I think that was the only reason he took Dyer off over Victor Wanyama. But it wasn't Victor's best game. But as you say, Rick, I mean, you're entitled to have one. I wouldn't say it was even a poor game. It was one game where he was below his best, that's for sure.
Coming over to you, Rob. I mean, like I say, Jason's mentioned there about the substitutions. I want to ask you something here. Heung-min Son, we bring him on with 22 minutes to go, looking to make an impact on the game. I mean, is that long enough to ask him to contribute to change a game on its head?
No, it's not. And one of the things that it's sort of around the house's answer, but I personally, I don't like Dyer and Wanyama in those positions where they play. And I know arguably they're two good players. I think what that does, it in a game like yesterday, it just ends up being a bit of a slugfest in the midfield. And I think we can be better than that, and we need another creative midfielder. The whole thing relies upon Eriksen having a storming game, and I thought he was a little bit quiet yesterday, and that's the first time in months and months and months, because he's been fantastic. And I agree, Son. But then again, you go back to the cup game last year, and I know Son was played out of position. I just think with all of us, hindsight is brilliant. But I said at the start, I don't like Wanyama and Dyer playing in those positions. It just makes us too solid in midfield. And maybe part of being a Spurs fan is that he's wanting a bit more attractive flair going on. And I think what Son would have done is turned their defenders on their heels. And Luis, who most of us really hate the guy, but he had a very good game, got booked early on, And we ended up making him look quite good because it was the sort of game that they actually wanted to participate in. So I think we should have just possibly asked them a few more questions. And somebody else said to me today, maybe Harry Winks should have come on. But I think Son or Winks should have come on 15 minutes earlier, maybe.
What about you, Vass? Do you go along with that? Do you think it was too late from Poch regarding the substitutions? Would you have changed anything earlier from your perspective?
Yeah, probably. I would have maybe brought Son in a little sooner. I'm not sure the system we were playing yesterday, but I think probably would have liked to have seen us go maybe 3 at the back earlier, maybe just drop Dyer. It seemed to me that it wasn't clear where Dyer was some of the time. He had that axis of Wanyama and Dyer in midfield, and then Dembele was playing just ahead of them, but it seemed as though Dembele was doing more of the tracking, so it was very confusing. And then by going 3 at the back, maybe we'd have been able to push the wing backs on a little bit more. But I would have brought Son on sooner. I probably would have brought Janssen on sooner too. I don't know what the guy can possibly do in 2 minutes of injury time, to be perfectly honest with you. But then the problem always is the question is, who do you take off? And you're not going to take off one of your front three because it'll just mean you'd have to take somebody else off, and then that could just weaken you further.
I think what's also coming around to you, Jace, I think fairly obvious is also you look at that bench and you think, barring Son, really, who do we have to bring on and change the game? You know, Vass mentions there, Janssen, we're bringing him on with 2 minutes to go. Let's be honest, he hasn't got much time to create anything. And again, Sissoko, we know that his career at the moment so far at Spurs has been a bit of a car crash. We're asking players to come on and make a difference in very little time. Jace, we need to see some investment, don't we, in this window?
Yeah, we've said that, over the course of the summer various times, haven't we? But, when we, Chelsea's bench wasn't exactly too hot yesterday, was it? Okay, Batshuayi and Pedro, but from that moment on, their bench wasn't exactly looking, it wasn't the type of bench Danny Rose would be rubbing his hands out and raving about, put it that way, yesterday. And I mean, the only thing as well about Son, as much as we might have wanted to bring him on earlier, he didn't really do much when he was on, did he? And you're talking about another player that's missed most of pre-season and isn't up to full speed fitness anyway. So it's always easy, as we say, to be wise after the event, and it's fine margins with them, isn't it? I mean, Hugo should stop the winner, and if Kane's one hits the post, the whole game, you get the win, and then everyone's praising Pochettino for the tactical plan we put in, and they're probably blaming Conte for effectively parking the bus for so much of the game. It is such tiny margins, and Hugo's error unfortunately dictates the interpretation of that.
Yeah, and like we've all said here, I mean, it's not like it's been a horrendous performance. I think we all agree across the board that the performance generally was quite good. I think we dominated that game for, say, a good 70 minutes. I think, like I say, at 1-1 Chelsea, you had the feeling that they would be happy to take the point.
If you said before the game, and if you sat there and said we'll have twice as many shots as them, we'll have 13 or 14 corners to their 3, we'll have 67% possession of the ball, do you want a tactical plan that comes up with that set of figures? We'd have snapped your hands off, wouldn't we? We'd say, yep, give us those stats, and we should go on to win the game. So, we came up with a game plan that gave us that much of the game, but the mistake of Hugo means you get nothing from the game.
We are going to come on to Lloris in a second. I just want to bring it round to you, Rob, just on Dele Alli. I think on this podcast, we've all, like I say, given the guy, lavished him with praise. He's a wonderful footballer. But my question to you, Rob, is that when, unfortunately, he isn't scoring, what else is he doing? But my argument is that, he's such an important player. You can't take him off because, like we saw against Newcastle, done nothing all game but scored. What's your thoughts on Dele Alli when he isn't scoring?
I think that who said it a second ago, but I think one of the great things when Son came on, it frees up Dele a bit because prior to that, he's almost like he's not trying too hard because he's very, very gifted footballer. There was one example first half actually where he nutmegged the centre half, I think, and then played that was for the Kane effort, I think. They hit the post. So his link up play is good, but I think he needs someone to feed off. He was getting. I don't know if anyone saw it, second half he was getting very frustrated with Ben Davies on a couple of occasions and almost asking him to push on and push through and push past like Rose does. So I just think he was a little bit frustrated, and I think if you've got that other creative player in the midfield, it really helps him out a little bit and takes a little bit of the weight off him and lets him do what he's good at.
And coming over to you there, Vass, I mean, did we see the bit of naivety in Dele Alli's game? We know Chelsea are deadly from set pieces, especially against Spurs at Wembley, and we give, like I say, a free hit to Alonso. I mean, don't get me wrong, an absolutely phenomenal free kick. 9 times out of 10 that maybe goes over the bar, but the way they are so, like I say, deadly in front of goal, especially from set pieces, should we know better there, Vass?
Absolutely. Did we not concede a free kick to them in similar fashion in the semi-final?
Yeah, well, William.
Yeah, so very, very naive from Dele Alli. And I don't know whether he thought he'd just get away with it, but he left his foot out long enough, which will always give the referee a decision to make, and unfortunately it worked against us. So that was really frustrating and a little bit annoying. It was Chelsea came to defend. Their squad was somewhat depleted, and it was clear that they came to defend. And the worst thing that Spurs could have done was give them something to defend. And we did that. We gave them a goal, and they were happy to sit back, and we were struggling to break them down. And, not until an own goal in the 80-something minute, okay, we blew it and shot ourselves in the foot at the end. But the worst thing we could have done was give them something to defend. And that was the frustrating thing about what Dele Alli did.
I mean, it's funny we talk about Dele like this, but we know the luck that he'll go against Burnley on Sunday and probably score a couple. This is the kind of nature of what the guy is like. He's an absolutely brilliant player, and like I say,
Absolutely.
we're not, like I say, taking that away from him. But it's just these certain situations where, unfortunately, his age does show at times. Because I'm sure Pochettino would have said to them, pre-match, look, don't give them any set pieces. We know how deadly they can be, and at the first opportunity, like I say, they put it away for 1-0. Coming over to you, Jace. We worked so hard to get back into the game. Like I say, we get the goal, an own goal. Christian Eriksen, I mean, I'm going to give it to him as an assist. It's 3 assists now in his last 2 games. So we're in there at 1-1. And then, like I say, Hugo Lloris. Listen, I think we all go across the board here and says that for us really as fans, we've not seen too many better goalkeepers than Hugo Lloris in a Spurs shirt. But I hate to say it, Jace, it's becoming a regular theme that he does seem to have these rickets in him in such massive games, Jace.
Well, I mean, I said it and I voiced it, I think, after Man City last year off air, and I said I don't quite want to go public and criticise him yet, but it is a problem with Hugo in those big games. We saw it the semi-final. I mean, the free kick of Alonso's. Yeah. I see him take some criticism for that. To me, that's just a fantastic free kick. If we score that, we're all raving about it. But I saw some people saying, why did he leave so much of a gap? But you've got to bear in mind, he took one step to close that gap against Williams in the semi-final last year. William put it the other side of him, and everyone then jumped on his back for taking that step. So I wouldn't have any go at him for the Alonso free kick. But we saw it in the Man City game last year, didn't we? Where both goals, he come out and missed a header for one, and then just failed to gather a ball and left a tap in for the second goal. Even Mane's goal, I think, at Anfield last year. The second goal, he just parried one straight down into his path. And it is a bit of a worry that he is making mistakes. He's made a couple for France, high-profile errors of late, hasn't he? With his distribution, and I think even that European Championship final goal, there's quite a lot of people in France will say the bloke's put one in from about 35 yards that's crept past him. So if we apply the same logic that we do to some players, you have to start criticising him a little bit and saying that's probably what stops him being the world-class goalkeeper, and you don't see those mistakes so much from a Peter Cech, but then again he'll make a couple of saves. I mean, we saw in that Juve game, didn't we, where he makes absolutely astonishing saves that perhaps one or two other goalkeepers don't make as well. So he is the best goalkeeper we've seen, and I don't particularly, I wouldn't be saying we've got to be looking for a new goalkeeper at all, but we have to accept that he has made one or two errors in big profile games for us.
Yeah, and coming over to you, Rob, I mean, like I say, we've discussed it there. I can even remember, like I say, a couple of goals against Arsenal in years gone by, the Gibbs, the Sanchez, the Willian the year before. I mean, don't get me wrong, as I've gone on record in saying, I think Hugo's a magnificent goalkeeper. I think Spurs, we'd find it very hard to find someone better than him. But is that a concern for you, Rob, that on the big stages where we really need him to be at his very best, I hate to say this, but he does seem to let us down?
I'd be contentious, and I wouldn't like to be having this conversation in an ideal world, but I'm on a podcast. But yeah. I think that I don't think we can criticise him at all. I think what he came out and said afterwards was very good, very honest. And I think there's probably a wider debate which says that actually most of the players we've got are not top, true world-class players. There we go. I've gone and said it. They're all, every player that we've got will let us down at some point. Arguably, yesterday everybody had a weak link, and I think when you see it from a goalkeeper, and I know, you're saying we see it time and time again. Some of the things I've seen on Twitter today are absolutely incredible in regard to Hugo. And have these people never watched Barry Daines, Ian Walker, Paul Robinson play in goal? To name three goalkeepers. So I understand what we're saying, but I also think that it's one of those things, isn't it? It's just unfortunate that you're in a position as a goalkeeper where if you make a mistake, it gets completely magnified. So not for me. I'm happy with Hugo.
And coming over to you, Vass, I mean, Rob's just said it there, really. You're either a hero or a villain as a keeper. I don't think anyone here at all is saying Hugo Lloris isn't good enough for Tottenham. I think all of us, we don't take him for granted. He's a fantastic keeper. But again, we can't avoid the point that, again, yesterday, it's a shot he should save. But he saves us majority of weeks, doesn't he?
He does. He's won us more points than he's lost us in games, no question about it. And, I mean, that one save he did in the Champions League last year where he sort of rolled it along the line, I mean, that was just astounding. So he's got the capacity to pull off fantastic saves, but unfortunately the role of a goalkeeper is like that. You make a mistake and generally it's going to lead to a goal. The other 10 players on the pitch may make a mistake, but the consequences won't be as severe. So yeah, and Rob's absolutely right. He's probably the best goalkeeper we have had for many, many years. So I think we've got to just accept that at times he will make mistakes. The question is that, he learns from it and tries to reduce the number of mistakes, which I'm sure he will do.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And sticking with you, Vass, you mentioned a point earlier, which I want to bring it back to you. You said about Ben Davies and Kieran Trippier, about the fullbacks, in comparison to, I think, last night's match of the day where Jermaine Genius was comparing them to Alonso and Moses. Do you think that's potentially where the game may have been lost? You look at the pace down Chelsea's flanks, Alonso and Moses really bombing on. And you just felt yesterday with Davies and Trippier, there was almost this reluctance to get forward. Is that an area where you feel that other teams might target us?
I don't think so. I think with Chelsea, perhaps Pochettino was somewhat afraid of the power that they had on the break, and therefore he reserved his fullbacks and maybe instructed them not to be as cavalier as they would otherwise be. It seemed as though we played four at the back, so he sort of packed the midfield, put Dyer and Wanyama and Dembele in through the middle, and then you had the front three. So perhaps that the fullbacks were tasked with not being so attacking minded, but I think at the back of his mind probably he was just concerned about Alonso and Moses on the break. So that's probably why. I don't think it's something that's going to be applicable to every opponent we play. Indeed, I think we'll be more on the front foot in other games.
What do you reckon, Jace? Do you go along with that? Do you think this is, like I say, just one of those games? Do you think moving forward we will see more of, like I say, a dominating performance from the fullbacks?
Well, I think we know both of them haven't got the pace that we used to see with Rose and Walker. And maybe Walker would have got beyond the line a few times, but then, having got beyond the line, would he have then produced the ball into the box that you'd have needed? And when we went in a semi-final and we wanted a bit of pace and that, we went with Son as a wing-back. We saw what could go wrong at the other end of the pitch when you pick the wrong player. So I think, a lot of it, I hate to say it, but it is that Chelsea syndrome where we let's be fair, all the criticism of the build-up in the game where Chelsea were a wounded animal, they're a poor side suddenly, and you still look at that starting 11 and you think that's still a good side, and they're experienced players that don't make too many mistakes, and like I say, they seem to have a way of picking every single thing you do wrong, they exploit it. And I think part of it yesterday is, as much as we can criticise our own performance, and I don't want to praise Chelsea, you have to accept that when you're up against a good side, that it won't always go in the way that you set it out and plan it. And hopefully Burnley will be a totally different case.
Fingers crossed. And Jace, just sticking with you, Harry Kane, The media seems to be running with this agenda again. They can't help but mention it, that it's 12 matches now in the month of August that he has gone without scoring. But I think we should be fairly confident, shouldn't we, Jace? He's getting into the right areas. He's hit the post now twice in 2 games. It's only a matter of time, isn't it, Jace, before he starts finding the back of the net?
Oh, things like that don't bother me at all. I mean, he hasn't scored a goal in August, but he scored 99 goals in other months for us. And we've got 3 games in August. I'm not in the least bit bothered with that. I actually think one thing I did notice about Harry, I don't know how it would have come across to people at the game. He just seems to. I mean, we know he's not the quickest striker around, Harry, but I thought there was a couple of times yesterday. I thought, has he put on half a yard of pace himself? There was a couple of bits in the first half where he seemed to get alongside. I can't remember if it was Louise or Christensen, but then got that little bit half yard extra space over the top of him, and he just looks even leaner and fitter this year than ever before. And I have a feeling he has just put on a little bit more pace than he's had in the past.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed. I mean, all you can ask him to do, Vass, coming to you, is get in the right areas and have shots, which he's doing. Only a matter of time, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's hit the post in both games so far. Very unlucky. Had probably most of our chances. I'm not concerned at all. I think this a lot's been made of this whole August thing. I'm pretty sure in his first season for us, he didn't start playing regularly until about November, so that probably accounts for one season. But yeah, I wouldn't read too much into it. I'm sure, all being well, if the team performs like they did yesterday against Burnley this coming Sunday, then I'm sure he'll bag a goal then.
And just coming back round to you, Vass, I want to ask you a question. Moussa Dembele, there wasn't many yesterday in terms of positives out there, but by God, I mean, this guy, regardless of his age, regardless of his fitness, he just seems to be getting better and better by games, doesn't he? Yeah,
I know he's got his detractors amongst our fan base, but for me, he's one of our better players. He had a great game yesterday, I thought, as did Kane and probably Eriksen, the 3 sort of standouts. But yeah, Dembele was excellent. He was recovering, winning the ball back for us. He was trying to get forward and just controlling the play for us as much as possible. It's just a shame that we didn't get more out of the game, just to sort of reward what he was doing for us.
Jace, I have to ask you, Moussa Dembele. I mean, for me again, Vass has just said it there, a complete midfielder. I know there wasn't many positives to take out of the game, but he's a Rolls Royce, isn't he, Jace, in that midfield?
He was head and shoulders our best player yesterday. I thought it was a vintage Moussa Dembele performance, wasn't it? So many times he's surrounded by 3 bodies, and his ability on the ball, his strength on the ball, shrugs people off. There was a couple of times you thought he's going to lose it yesterday, and yet he still somehow manages to retain the ball. He's a fantastic player, and he's one of the massive key players to us as that season goes on. We just need to get him playing 90 minutes rather than 70 minutes, and a few more times in a week type of thing. But no, he's a fantastic player.
Well, what do you think? Do you think he's got the capacity to play 90 minutes? Or do you think, like I say, we're looking to Harry Winks to possibly be the next one to the throne to take over him in that midfield? What do you think? I
think that was a lot of people's suspicions are that Ross Barkley's supposed to be coming as a replacement, but that's another point. I think he's a fantastic player, obviously. Worry with him is, and it was probably 2 seasons ago when he drops too deep. I think he needs to play over the halfway line in the opposition's half, and sometimes he's got a tendency to drop deeper than that. So he's actually got to beat 2 men to be in a dangerous position. And if he could shoot, he wouldn't be at Tottenham. There we are.
Dembele, what a fabulous footballer. Guys, we're going to go to a very, very quick break. Then after, we are going to do a preview of the Champions League draw this coming Thursday and take your questions for the panel, and also fitting in a preview of Burnley, a bumper E-Spurs podcast. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back after this very short break.
Hello, and welcome to Loan Watch, a weekly update on our young players out on loan. Another short edition of Loan Watch this week, as only 2 of our loanees have been in action since I last spoke to you. In the Sky Bet Championship, Josh Onham had played twice for Aston Villa, 77 minutes in their 2-1 defeat to Reading, and 30 minutes of their 4-2 home victory over Norwich City. Josh started both games and was only withdrawn against Norwich because of injury. In League 1, Conor Ogilvie had once again played the full game for Gillingham, as the Gills lost 1-0 away to MK Dons. That's it for this week's edition of Loan Watch. Speak to you again next week, and come on, you Spurs!
Hello guys, welcome back to the E-Spurs Podcast. As always, we ask you to get your questions into us on a weekly basis to do with Tottenham Hotspur. Before we take your questions, we're just going to have a very brief look at the Champions League draw to come this coming Thursday. Jace, I'm going to come around to you first. Tottenham, we are going to be in pot 3 as our coefficient ranking is lower than Europa League winners Manchester United. Is that fair, Jace?
Whether you think it's fair or not, that's the coefficient system that they come up with, and our coefficient's nowhere near Manchester United, so you just get on with it. I think, unlike last year, where, let's be fair, all right, Monaco became a fantastic side, but when we did that draw, we thought, well, that doesn't look too bad. I think this year you will definitely get one of the big boys in it, because with Manchester United, Manchester City in the draw, I don't know where Liverpool will come in that draw, but with the country protection that you get, if you do pull one of the Russian type sides, because I think Spartak Moscow and Shakhtar are both in pot 1, you then take Manchester City and Man United out of pot 2, and it leaves you Barcelona, Atletico, Paris, Dortmund or Porto. So you are going to see a big boy this year that we didn't really get last year. Fingers crossed. Although it's probably the worst team and the hardest one of the lot, I would love to see us get Real Madrid. I wasn't lucky enough to be there for the last time we had Madrid, and to me they're the biggest side in the world. They have always been, for me, the biggest side in the world. So I've got fingers crossed for Real Madrid, and then hopefully the other teams that we get give us the chance to go through the group. But I don't want us to get CSKA, Leverkusen and Monaco as being our Champions League group. I really want one of those big boys this year.
Okay, and coming over to you, Rob. Jason's mentioned there Real Madrid. We've also got potentially to face one of these teams, including Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Juventus, Benfica, Shakhtar Donetsk, Monaco or Spartak Moscow. So, like I say, Jason's mentioned it there. It's quite a lot of big teams in there. Anyone you would want us to avoid? Anyone you'd like us to get, Rob?
Well, I'd like us to get Juventus, obviously, because we've already shown what we can do to them. I'm sort of the opinion, the same opinion I think as Vass there. I think I'd like us to get a decent team. I know they're all decent teams, but just a name basically. I don't want to go to Shakhtar Donetsk or places like that. So yeah, probably not Bayern Munich at this stage, because what happened to Arsenal last year twice.
You make a fair point, Rob. I come over to you, Vass. What do you make of it then? Is there any teams then you'd like to get? Anyone you'd like to avoid?
Not really. Probably agree with Rob. Wouldn't like to hit Bayern Munich at this stage, and maybe not even Real Madrid. So the rest of pot 1, I think we can be competitive. I don't know what goes on with the other pots, who we might get, who we might not. But whatever we do, we've got to put on a better showing than we did last year.
Well, just sticking with you, Vass, on that. I mean, you mentioned the showing. Let's just have a quick chat on it. I mean, we've seen the selections last year for the Champions League be a little bit, like I say, mixed. Are we expecting that to be different this season, Vass? What's your thoughts going into it?
I think it will be different this season. I think it has to be, and I think Pochettino, hopefully the pennies drop that it has to be. The last campaign was so disappointing after taking so much effort to get there and not being there for a number of years, that to get back in finally and then just wilter away like that, I don't think that was good. We need to groom these players for bigger things. We need to start competing for trophies, and we've got to start showing better in the Champions League, and hopefully we will this season.
Yeah. And coming over to you, Jace, I'm going to ask the same question to you. Are we going to expect anything different this coming Champions League campaign?
Fingers crossed we are, but the way the squad is at the moment and the lack of options that we've got, don't forget, as we've said all along, Dele Alli banned for the first 4 games, isn't it? 4 of the 6 games. So, I can't remember now what fixtures we've got after Champions League games, but it all depends. If we can keep going along in the league quite nicely, then that's one thing. But if we suddenly drop 2 or 3 points in the league and we've got a tough game coming up on that Saturday and he thinks, it is Real Madrid, we probably will get beat, he might do like he did with Monaco. You don't know. I think, we'll have a better idea once that transfer window shuts next week of how many more bodies come in to the side to see, have a better idea of what type of squads or what type of sides we'll pick.
And coming over to you, Rob, what's your thoughts on it? I have a feeling there might be some pessimism here. Can you give us some optimism?
No, it's stressing me out already.
I can tell.
Listening to you guys, it's stressing me out. I think, although it is quite evident, we haven't got that much strength in depth. But it's a growth thing, isn't it? It's something that the players are now used to. They had last season Champions League, so hopefully we can go on. Well, we'll have to improve on our Champions League performances last season. But yeah, it's not a sort of the biggest and the most experienced squad that is assembled. So I think that's going to be really important to see whether he manages to get his 3 or 4 players in before the transfer window stops.
You have a feeling though that year they had in it last year, that can only do them, good. You look at the team and you think, from a Spurs perspective, if we pick what our best 11 is, then 9 times out of 10 we should get the results, dare I say, against the sides maybe below the very top tier, where again we'll be in for a game. So it'll be interesting to see what he does in terms of the selections. I think no Tottenham fan can argue, providing we put out our best possible 11. I think that was just simply the argument last year, that going into these Champions League games, we didn't always see our best 11. So therefore you were kind of left with that kind of question mark. Well, how good were Tottenham in the Champions League? Because we didn't actually see what our best 11 was. So it does leave questions. And that's what we're going to do right now. We are going to take some questions from tonight's listeners. We've got a question here from Patrick N at Porky Lunch FTW. I think he wants you to put your neck on the line here, Vass. He says, who do you think could undergo a medical and officially sign for Spurs before Burnley?
I think Jace volunteered for that one, didn't he? Well, I think the Davinson Sanchez deal was agreed last week. I know the guy's still waiting for work permit clearance. So chances are he will get a medical done. I don't know whether it'll be done in time for him to make any sort of impact on the team or appearing. To be perfectly honest, I can't see anybody coming in that quickly. I'm sure we'll add to the squad, and I'm sure we might even get the odd medical done. But even if we purchase somebody before the weekend, I think it's highly unlikely that anyone would come straight into the first team.
Okay, and just sticking with you, Vass, for a second, what's your thoughts on Sanchez? Is that an exciting signing for you?
I think so, yes. I mean, I don't know a lot about him, but from the little I've seen, there's a lot to like. He's still very young, and it gives us options. If he develops in the way we want, or whether he can come straight in, it kind of makes 3 at the back look more like a prominent, and maybe moving Dyer into midfield permanently, or it could give us more flexibility with Dyer in defence, maybe covering right back from time to time. It just gives Pochettino the capacity to shuffle his pack a little bit more.
Yeah. Come over to you, Jace. A club record signing. For me, I think, based on, and I'm going to say it, YouTube clippings, I think at best, he looks like a player that could really compensate for the loss of Walker's pace, and again, really enhance that partnership of Alderweireld and Vertonghen to that become now, for me, potentially the best trio in the Premier League. Is that how you see it, Jace, or do you see any difference to that?
I think we have to be honest, and unless we've watched, all of us sit here and watch Dutch football week in, week out, you are relying on little clips you've seen. And there's some fantastic clips, but there's a few clips that people are absolutely delighted to see and worry me, because when somebody has to make something like 15 sliding tackles a season, I don't ever see Toby or Ledley having to make too many sliding tackles. So, does his pace get him out of position, situations like we used to accuse Walker of doing, just purely relying on his pace because he doesn't see the things? But, young central defenders, let's be fair, we know central defenders are at their best when they're 28, 29, not when they're 20 and 21. And the other bit that does worry about me when I see some of the clips is we see him making a few Timothy Atuba-like turns on the edge of his box, and you think, do that in the Premier League and you're asking for trouble. But I'm sure with Pochettino coaching him and things like that, that we'll see an excellent defender in time. But I think the talent looks to be there, but it looks incredibly raw, shall we say, at the moment. And I'm surprised we've paid quite as much as we have done. I'm sure Daniel Levy wasn't too happy to end up having to pay that price.
Yeah, I mean, coming over to you, Rob, Jace mentions there about the price, but for me that would potentially mean that Spurs desperately wanted the player and Pochettino wanted him. There was rumours that, you know, we fought off the likes of Inter Milan, Barcelona, Real Madrid. I mean, it's great to see us having a manager that seems to have that strength in him, that he can, like I say, convince players to join Spurs, dare I say it, over the likes of the Real Madrids out there. Is that a positive for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think the price tag also has to be put into perspective, because was it 15% less than Kyle Walker? So everything everybody knows, everything is inflated totally at the moment. But he looks to be, again, from what little I've seen, but what I've read, seems to be a good player. That he's got the Ajax. A bit of Ajax system in him, so that'll be the fourth Ajax player that we've got in the team. He sort of ticks an awful lot of boxes. So yeah, I'm sort of excited, semi-excited. I don't think Danny Rose will be that excited, put it that way.
Interesting that if you had to Google him. I know that's probably going around at the moment, but there you go. Coming over to you, Vass, we've got a question here from Man Like Delhi 20, who says squad depth is a major issue. As bringing in Janssen and Sissoko aren't players to change a game, will that cost us through other competitions? What's your thoughts on that, Vass?
I think we've been quite harsh on Janssen and Sissoko. I know that they haven't worked out so far, and that is clear for everyone to see. But it's kind of difficult for them to make impacts off the bench when, like on Saturday, Sunday, Janssen came off for 2 minutes and Sissoko came on for a little while, but he sort of started in the middle, then he went on the left, then he came on the right. And, it's very hard for these players to make any sort of impact at all with that level of game time. In terms of squad depth, as I said earlier, I'm pretty sure we're going to add, I probably think another 3 players at least, and maybe the only outgoing will be Wimmer, who's interested in West Bromwich Albion at the moment. And with Davies and Sanchez coming in, that's understandable. It really does depend if anybody else leaves. Possibly there's rumours of Sissoko going out on loan, but if he stays, then so be it. I think we'll have added enough to the squad to make us a little bit more deeper than last time. And we do still have Lamela to come back. I know he has his detractors too, but for me, he does. I think he's a good player. He offers a lot to the side. If he can get fit, then that's an extra body on the bench, an extra quality body on the bench. So things could change around quite quickly, and Rose will be back too, hopefully at some point if we don't shift him on. So I think maybe 4 or 5 games into the season, we'll see a different Spurs side.
Okay, and Vass, very quickly, just give us a couple of names then. You said 2 or 3 players potentially coming in. Very quickly, name us the names that you'd like to see Spurs sign.
Well, it's not so much who I'd like to see sign, it's who I think they will sign. And I think they will get Barkley. I think that will be a deadline day move, really. We're playing cat and mouse with Everton over that one at the minute, and I can't see Everton wanting to hang on to a player that will only have a year left on his contract past deadline day. I think we might be making a move for Sessegnon from Fulham, so that will give us more. He's still young, of course, so maybe he's not one for particularly this season, but at least it will help us in the domestic cups. And yeah, I think we'll probably get one more. I'm not sure who that might be, but I'm pretty sure we'll add another body as well.
Okay, fantastic. Coming over to you, Rob. You was at the game Sunday, so this is a question from Amos Hermans, who said, what do you guys make of the atmosphere in the ground? From the TV it looked fine, but sound-wise I thought it was very echoey. Can you give us any light on that?
Yeah, it's. I'm biased. I don't like Wembley at all. New Wembley. I just had too many good times at the old Wembley. But I don't quite understand what they've done. I actually had really. The whole getting there was fine. Wembley Way was fine. It was actually nice Although we've had Champions League games, they've been different because they were night games. This was nice because you were there amongst 70 plus thousand Spurs fans, whereas normally it's obviously a 50-50 split or a 40-40-20 with corporates or whatever. So it was quite nice thinking, yeah, I've got my whole tribe here. And the atmosphere was okay. There were little bits that were, there was a great bit where everyone was singing with a park lane, and and it never really got going. And I think part of that is modern stadiums, and I think we've almost been spoilt with White Hart Lane, where the noise was, you can generate a fantastic noise very quickly at White Hart Lane, and you can keep that going. Whereas actually, it's very difficult to sustain any level of noise at Wembley. And yeah, that was probably it. And the drum was unnecessary, but that's too cliched to go into.
No, I think, like I say, that's been commented by quite a few, Rob. That has been picked up on,
Exactly.
unfortunately. Going to come round to you, Jace. Going to try and do a double question here so we can squeeze in the Burnley preview. We've got Drew Rawn asking us, in terms of Trippier, does he offer us enough in big games? Offered very little moving forward. Is Aurier the answer for Tottenham, the right back? And Jace, do we also lack pace? Would you like to see a pacey player brought in? So 2 questions there, Jace. Can you roll them into one for us?
Well, we definitely need pace further up the pitch, but pace still has to come with an end product, because we used to see Aaron Lennon have fantastic pace, and then everyone would be going on about his final ball. We know Carl Walker had fantastic pace, but if you don't produce the final ball, it's not much use just having pace for the sake of pace. So that's what I would say. Aurier, I think of all the right backs linked, I think he certainly has the biggest reputation, but my concern with Aurier will be is, can Pochettino handle that reputation, and will he shy away from having a player that speaks quite openly in the dressing room and is quite critical of his managers in the dressing room? And so I'd still be quite surprised if Aurier came in. And I think if Aurier did come in, I'm not so sure that's the one that Pochettino ideally would have wanted.
Okay. I mean, my argument would be, Jace, just very on that, he looks like a very good player moving forward. But, I mean, again, you mentioned there about the risk, but is it time, Jace, very quickly, Pochettino takes that risk and tries to manage a player with a supposed ego? He's had a lot of players that you would argue could be potential nodding dogs. He's got someone there that may challenge him, but could also, Jace, make him a better manager for having to manage someone, potentially, with, a bit of an ego. What's wrong with that if it's channeled in the right way?
Well, I think you might have to have that debate on a different one when we got a lot more time. But I mean, I've said that myself, haven't I? I think, we probably do need that type of person to just help us get across that, get that last little extra % that you need. But that Pochettino doesn't seem to want that player, and maybe shies away from that and puts the whole spirit of the squad as the primary thing for himself. And it's difficult to criticise that when the bloke's got 86 points and has put us in 2 title races that we've never been in for 40, 50 years or whatever. So but yeah, I think the Zlatan type figure that we perhaps do need to get us across the line is the type of player that he just doesn't seem to want there.
Definitely, like I say, Jace, you mentioned it there, question for another podcast. Guys, very quickly, going to thank you all so much for all your questions. I'm sorry we haven't got through all of them. Jason, as always, will be doing his best to answer each and every one of them, which will hopefully then be released onto the E-Spurs website, which is www.e-spurs.com. Guys, we're going to go very quickly on to a preview of the Burnley game. So, coming round to you, Rob, I'm not too sure if you're the right person to start with here, but Burnley, they won away to Chelsea on the opening day, albeit with 9 men. They've just signed Chris Woods to replace Andre Gray. I mean, we hate players coming for a debut to play Spurs, don't we?
Yeah, especially at Wembley.
Especially at Wembley.
They've also got John Waters and Phil Bardsley from Stokes, which makes them into, that's going to make them into an even more attractive team to watch. Jack Cork looks like a decent player from Swansea. Yeah, but that's you're asking for a prediction, or you just. I think it's a good team to come up against next, basically.
And you think we can win that one, Rob?
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. Probably let's look at 3-1.
3-1, okay. I like it. A bit of optimism there, Rob. I'm loving it. Going to come round to you, Vass. quick question for you. What do you think Burnley will do in terms of their setting out? I mean, we saw Chelsea, they very much, like I say, throughout that game, seem to sit back, let Spurs have plenty of the possession. Are we going to see Burnley do the same, or are they going to come to Wembley, treat it as a cup final, and try to take the game to Spurs?
There's always that fear, and Antonio Conte alluded to it, that Wembley will galvanise other teams as much as anything else. So we've got to factor that in. But I do suspect that Burnley will just come to frustrate and look to hit us on the break. I think that's what they did to Chelsea last week, and there'll be more of the same. I think if we could play our normal game, however, I could see us controlling the game in a similar manner to the way we did against Chelsea. Although this time I see us creating a lot more better opportunities for scoring. So I'm quite hopeful that we can win comfortably on the weekend.
Okay, and just out of interest, Vass, you mentioned earlier that potentially Sanchez, if he gets this work permit, could feature for the game. Would you be inclined to put him in straight away, or would you leave the squad the same as what it was against Chelsea?
No, I'd leave it the same, Ricky. I don't see the man will need to sort of acclimatise somewhat before throwing him in at the deep end, despite the fact that he will be our most expensive signing with all the add-ons. But I might be inclined to just wait for now.
Fair enough. And coming round to you there, Jace. Come on then, let's have your verdict on the game itself. Before we go to predictions, Jace, I'm going to ask the same question to you. How do you see Burnley setting themselves up at Wembley?
I don't think they'll be as negative as perhaps Vass just said. I think they certainly threw men forward at Chelsea, even though they were trying to catch Chelsea on the break. They were certainly throwing plenty of men forward at that time. And to go to Chelsea and score 3, despite the fact Cahill got sent off, shows you their intent. And Sean Dyche has actually preferred to go with 2 men up front, or certainly one just off of a front man. So I don't think they'll be negative and park the bus type football. And let's be fair, we had 2 really tough games with them last year. It was a scrappy, ugly win up there towards the end of the year, and even at White Hart Lane before Christmas, they scored first and then made life really, really difficult for us. So, and we will, I think, get a better impression of what Wembley will do to the opposition, because Chelsea are comfortable playing there. Their players are used to playing on that big stage, and it will be interesting to see what Wembley does do to a side where most of those players will be going to Wembley for their first times, unless 1 or 2 have been in playoff finals that I can't remember. So I expect a tougher game than perhaps 1 or 2 people, but I do expect us to come out on top, that's for sure.
Okay, and Jace, go on then, give us a prediction. What do you think?
I'll go 2-0 Tottenham.
2-0 Tottenham, okay. And Vass, just coming back round to you, the last one to yet give us a prediction.
Yeah, I was going to say 2-0 as well, but so that I don't end up agreeing with Jace, I'll say 3-0.
3-0, okay, no problem at all. Should be, like I say, a decent game. Would be great to, like I say, get that win, the first win in the Premier League at Wembley, off our backs. Jace, thank you so much for coming back on tonight.
No problem, mate. Good to catch up.
Yeah, good to catch up. Hopefully, Jace, in better circumstances next week. Rob, thank you very much for coming back onto the show. It's been a pleasure.
And likewise for me, mate.
Good. And finally, Vass, again, thanks so much for joining us tonight. Been great having you back on, Vass.
No, my pleasure, Ricky. Thanks for having me on.
Guys, well, that's it. As we roll into our second game at Wembley in the Premier League against Burnley, all that remains to be said is, come on, you Spurs!